Central idea questions are where careful readers separate themselves from everyone else. The SAT puts 3 to 5 of these on each module, and they look deceptively simple. Just pick the main idea. But every wrong answer is designed to catch a specific mistake. Today, I'm going to give you 3 checks that catch all of them. By the end of this video, you'll never get tricked by a detail trap, a direction flip, or a vague overgeneralization again. Let's get into it. Every central idea question has 4 choices, 1 correct answer, and 3 traps. The traps fall into 3 categories, and each one gets caught by 1 check. Check 1, scope. The main idea must cover the whole passage, not just 1 sentence. If a choice repeats a specific detail, a date, a name, a number, 1 study, it's almost certainly too narrow. The main idea is the forest, not a tree. Check 2, stance. The main idea must match the direction of the passage's claim. If the passage argues X is true, the main idea can't say X is false. Watch especially for choices that describe the old view the passage is rejecting. Those are switcheroo traps. Check 3, specificity. The main idea must be specific to this passage, not a vague truism about the topic. If the choice would work for any article about this subject, it's too broad. Real main ideas have a real argument. Now the flip side, the 3 traps these checks are designed to catch. 1, too narrow. A vivid detail, a specific name, a single statistic, something that appears in the passage and feels grabby. It's a trap because grabby doesn't mean central. 2, switcheroo. A choice that describes the opposite of what the passage argues, often phrased to sound authoritative, usually catches students who didn't read carefully enough to track direction. 3, too broad. A sweeping claim about the topic that could appear at the start of any article. Feels safe but says nothing. The passage actually argues. 3 checks, 3 traps, they map 1 to 1. Let's see them in action. Let's start clean. The passage is about urban beekeeping. Hive counts have doubled in big cities. Then comes the claim. Bees often do better in cities than in rural areas because cities have diverse flowering plants blooming all season. Hive is stronger, honey is plentiful. What's the passage arguing? That urban environments, counter to intuition, are good for bees. A says, hive counts in cities have doubled since 2015. True fact from the passage, but it's 1 sentence and it's the setup, not the argument. Check 1, scope, fails, too narrow. B says, contrary to common assumptions, urban environments can provide bees with more favorable conditions than rural areas. That's the passage's whole argument in 1 sentence. Keep. C says, monoculture farming is harmful to pollinators around the world. The passage mentions monoculture briefly as part of the comparison, but it's not making a global claim about pollinators. Check 3, specificity fails, too broad. D says rural areas remain the ideal habitat for honeybees. That's the opposite of what the passage says. Check 2, stance fails, classic switcheroo. Answer is B. See how each wrong answer failed a different check? That's the pattern. Japanese ukiyo-e prints arriving in Europe in the 1850s. Monet, Degas, Cassatt studied them obsessively. Absorbed flat colors, cropped compositions, unusual angles. By the 1870s, these ideas were transforming Impressionist painting. The argument, Japanese prints transformed how Impressionists painted. A says the Impressionists ultimately rejected the influence of Japanese prints. The passage says the exact opposite, switcheroo. Stance fails. B says, Mary Cassatt collected more ukiyo-e prints than any other Impressionist. The passage doesn't say this, it's a fake specific. Even if it were true, it's 1 narrow fact. Scope fails. C says Japanese ukiyo-e prints had a transformative influence on how the Impressionists approached composition, color, and perspective. That's the passage's whole claim. Keep. D says Western art has historically drawn on influences from many non-European sources. Sweeping claim about Western art. The passage is about 1 movement and 1 source. Too broad. Specificity fails. Answer is C. Those were warm-ups. Let's dial it up. Remote work productivity. Opens with a puzzle. Studies give contradictory results. Then a 2023 survey of 8,000 workers answers, why? Productivity effects depend on the job. Engineers gain 12% working from home. Customer service reps lose 8%. Conclusion, blanket claims miss the real pattern. So the passage argues, it depends on the job. A says remote work consistently reduces productivity across most industries. Passage explicitly says productivity goes up for some jobs. Switcheroo, stance fails. B says whether remote work increases or decreases productivity depends largely on the type of job being performed. That's exactly the conditional claim. Keep. C says software engineers become 12% more productive when they work from home. Real stat from the passage, but it's one data point supporting the bigger claim. Scope fails. Narrow. D says workplace conditions affect employee performance in complex ways. Could describe any HR article. Check 3. Specificity. Fails. Vague. Answer is B. When a passage resolves an it depends puzzle, the it depends is the main idea. Ursula K. Le Guin opens by acknowledging she's famous for her novels. Then pivots with yet. Her nonfiction is equally important but undervalued, describes the essays. Closes, critics now argue her nonfiction deserves recognition alongside her novels. The argument lives after the pivot word. Her nonfiction has been overlooked and deserves its due. A says, Le Guin's long overlooked nonfiction deserves recognition alongside the novels for which she is famous. Matches the corrective claim. Keep. B says Le Guin wrote essays on feminism, aging, and anarchism, topics her essays covered, supporting detail, not the argument. Scope fails. C says many acclaimed novelists also produce important nonfiction, could apply to any novelist. The passage is specifically about Le Guin. Specificity fails. D says Le Guin's novels have rightly overshadowed her less accomplished essays. That's the opposite of what the passage argues. Stance fails. Switcheroo. Answer is A. When you see yet, however, or but followed by a corrective claim, that's almost always where the main idea lives. Microplastics in soil. The passage makes two connected claims. 1. Early evidence says microplastics in soil matter ecologically, and 2. We don't fully understand it yet. Cites a 2022 German study, earthworm behavior, water retention. Repeatedly says findings are preliminary. Main idea needs to capture both halves. Emerging concern plus not yet well understood. It says a 2022 study in northern Germany found that microplastics affect soil microbial communities. One study used as evidence. Scope fails. Narrow. B says microplastics in agricultural soil have been shown to have no meaningful ecological impact. Passage says concern is growing. Switcheroo. Stance fails. C says microplastic pollution in soil is emerging as a significant ecological concern whose full effects remain poorly understood. Both halves. Keep. D says plastic pollution has become one of the most pressing environmental problems of the modern era. Sweeping claim about plastic pollution broadly. Passage is about microplastics in soil specifically. Specificity fails. Answer is C. When a passage argues X matters but we don't fully understand it, look for answers that capture both halves. Medieval guilds. Opens, guilds are remembered as trade associations, set prices, controlled apprenticeships. Then, yet reducing guilds to their economic functions misses a substantial part of what they actually did. Rest of the passage, guilds as mutual aid societies, funerals, widows, orphans, pensions, hospitals. Closes, workers relied on guilds for survival, not just regulation. The argument, guilds were both economic and social welfare institutions. The purely economic picture is incomplete. As says, medieval guilds paid funeral costs and supported the families of deceased members. Specific welfare examples, supporting evidence. Scope fails. Narrow. B says medieval guilds served as both economic regulators and important providers of social welfare, challenging purely economic accounts of them. Captures both halves and the corrective claim. Keep. C says medieval European cities developed a wide range of institutions to serve their residents. Vague could apply to any medieval history passage. Specificity fails. D says historians have increasingly recognized that medieval guilds had little function beyond economic regulation. Exact opposite of the passage's argument. Switcheroo. Stance fails. Answer is B. When a passage explicitly says that common view misses something, the main idea is what it's adding, not the common view itself. Literary translation. Sets up a common view. Translation is neutral. Translator is invisible. Then pivots. In reality, every choice a translator makes is an act of interpretation. Gives examples: rhythm, idioms, voice. Cites Venuti. Honest translations acknowledge the creative labor. The argument: translation is interpretation and creation, not neutral transfer. Says the best literary translations are those that fully disappear behind the original. That's the view the passage sets up to reject. Switcheroo, stance fails. B says Lawrence Venuti argues that honest translations acknowledge their own creative choices. Here's the trap. Venuti is cited in the passage, but he's cited as support for the main claim, not as the main claim. The passage's argument is broader than Venuti's view. Scope fails. Narrow. This is the kind of trap the SAT loves on hard central idea questions, using a real citation from the passage to disguise a too narrow answer. C says languages shape how we perceive the world in subtle and far-reaching ways. That's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, not what the passage argues. Specificity fails. D says literary translation is inherently an interpretive and creative act that produces a distinct new work rather than a neutral transfer. That's the argument. Keep. Answer is D. On hard questions, watch for answers that name a scholar from the passage. They're often narrowing a broader argument into one person's view. Last one. Invasive species, 20th century default, eradicate. Then, growing research says default is unrealistic, sometimes counterproductive. Some invaders are so integrated that removing them destabilizes ecosystems. Mark Davis proposes contextual management. Evaluate each case on its merits. Controversial but gaining influence. The argument: the field is shifting from eradicate by default to context-sensitive management. It says environmental managers increasingly agree that aggressive eradication is the only effective response. Exact opposite of the passage. Switcheroo. Stance fails. B says emerging ecological research is challenging the traditional goal of eradicating invasive species, arguing for context-sensitive management instead. Captures the shift itself. Old default, new alternative, direction of change. Keep. C says ecosystems across the globe are being reshaped by human activity in complicated ways. Could describe 1,000 articles. Specificity fails. D says ecologist Mark Davis introduced the phrase contextual management to describe his approach. True from the passage, but it's a credit line detail, not the argument. Scope fails. Narrow. Answer is B. If you got this one, you've got the whole pattern. When a passage contrasts an old default with an emerging alternative, the main idea is the shift itself. SAT Central Ideas. Quick reference. The 3 checks. Scope covers the whole passage. Stance matches passage direction. Specificity argues something real. Something real. Do. Read the passage first. Then form the main idea in your own words before looking at choices. Do on pivot words, yet, however, but expect the main idea after the pivot. Do. For it depends passages, look for the conditional itself. Don't. Pick a specific detail just because you remember it. Don't. Pick a vague truism that could describe any article. Don't. Pick a view the passage is rejecting. Key rule: the main idea is the passage's argument, not a fact from inside it. 3 checks. 3 traps. Master those and central ideas become the easiest points on the reading section. That's all 8 examples, from a clean, easy one about urban bees to the hard ones about translation and ecology. If you want more practice, I've got a free PDF with additional central idea questions just like these. Link in the description and pinned comment. If this helped you, drop a like and subscribe. I post new SAT tutorials every week, covering every question type on the test. And if any of these tripped you up, leave a comment and I'll break it down further. Good luck on test day. You've got this.